On my 48th birthday, I went to the northern frontier to surprise my husband. The surprise turned into a shock. The great general who had guarded the border for 26 years had a house full of children and grandchildren at the northern frontier, surrounded by 6 children, all happy and harmonious. My own son was standing right next to that woman, and familiarly called her mom. He turned and saw me, his eyes frantic, begging me,
"Mother, please don't make a scene."
I wasn't making a scene. Calmly, I turned and returned to the capital. The royal decree of divorce was sent express, at top speed, to the northern frontier. At that time, Victor was frantic, in a panic. My brief appearance at the border city hit him like a boulder, shattering the peaceful haven he'd built over 20 years. His mistress, Lily, wept, terrified and uneasy. The older illegitimate sons and daughters were on edge too. He was trying to calm them down while already thinking how to explain to me. He'd already written several heartfelt letters, ready to send them to the capital, begging for my forgiveness. In his eyes, I was just momentarily upset, throwing a tantrum. Women are always soft-hearted. Once he returned in triumph with military glory and the king's rewards, bought me some fancy jewelry, and said a few sweet nothings. Naturally, he'd win me back. He'd even come up with an excuse, that Lily was just comfort for his loneliness at the northern frontier, and those kids were just accidents. The only wife he truly acknowledged in his heart was always me. He believed that for the honor of the general's manor, for the future of our children, for his reputation as General of the North, I, Eleanor Vance, would surely put the bigger picture first. My 26 years of being a virtuous wife made him blindly confident in me. So, when the royal envoy showed up at the headquarters, before all the senior officers, and unrolled that bright yellow royal decree, Victor was still dazed and confused. He thought it was an order from the king to return in triumph, or an early reward for him. He straightened his robes and knelt down respectfully. The royal envoy's shrill but loud voice echoed throughout the tent, every word clear as crystal.
"By the grace of heaven, the king decrees, Eleanor Vance, wife of Victor Sterling, General of the North, is a noble lady from a prestigious family, possessing both virtue and talent. Since marrying into the Sterling family, for 26 years, she has been self-disciplined and courteous. She served her in-laws with utmost filial piety, raised and educated the children well, and her contributions to managing the household are undeniable."
Hearing this, Victor secretly sighed in relief, thinking the king was commending me,
and indirectly appeasing me.
But the royal envoy's next words struck him like lightning.
"Though husband and wife shared deep love but shallow fate, their bond is severed. Eleanor Vance, with tears of blood, humbly begs to end these earthly ties. The king and the queen mother, pitying her solitude and hardship, grant her request. From this day forth, Victor Sterling and Eleanor Vance shall be divorced and live separately. The marriage contract is void. By the mandate of heaven, marriage and remarriage shall follow their own destiny. The Sterling family must not harass her for any reason. Violators will be severely punished, by royal decree."
The entire tent fell into a deathly silence. All the generals held their breath, staring in shock at the kneeling general.
A divorce, initiated by the woman, and endorsed by both the king and the queen mother, a royal decree of divorce.
This is no longer a family matter, this is the royal authority itself, slapping General of the North hard in the face. Victor Sterling's mind went blank. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that I, Eleanor Vance, dared to go this far. I was always so gentle, so considerate of the bigger picture, so deferential to him. How could I? He couldn't believe even more that the Queen Mother, who had always supported him, would, for my sake, issue such a merciless royal decree. This matter had spiraled completely out of control, and a panic he had never experienced overwhelmed him like a tidal wave. The perfect image he had maintained for 26 years, of the god of war and a loyal subject, at this moment, by a royal decree, was torn open with a huge rift. Meanwhile, inside the general's manor in the capital, I had already bathed and burned incense, changed into a simple, elegant dress. With Butler Thomas and a group of trusted aides, I set up an altar in the main hall to respectfully await the royal decree. When the eunuch finished reading the same decree, I solemnly bowed and kowtowed.
"Your loyal subject Eleanor Vance receives the decree. Thank you, Your Majesty, thank you, Queen Mother, for granting your loyal subject's wish."
My voice was calm and solemn, without a tremor. After receiving the decree, I stood up, turned and took from Butler Thomas the already prepared thick ledgers. That was my master dowry list. Those passed down from my mother, and those added by the Vance family when I married, every single item was recorded clearly. I handed the ledgers to the manor's old butler, Alfred, who was already ashen-faced.
"Alfred, according to this ledger, start to take inventory. Within 3 days, all items must be moved to the Vance Villa in the South District."
I paused, my gaze sweeping over all the terrified servants.
"Not a single item shall be missing."
Looking at the ledgers thick as bricks, the servants finally realized that this general's wife, who had been a devoted wife and loving mother for 26 years, was not joking. I was going to strip the general's manor bare. I want him to lose everything he gained from me. I want him to fall from the clouds, to experience firsthand what it means to have nothing. Early next morning, before the sky was even light, dozens of carriages with the Vance crest rolled to a stop at the general's manor, blocking off almost the whole street. This spectacle drew a crowd of gawkers. News in the capital's noble circles spreads like wildfire. Word that the general of the north had been divorced by his first wife had already set the town buzzing last night. Today's scene took this drama to its peak. I paid no mind to the commotion outside. I had a grand armchair brought in and sat in the main hall of the general's manor, sipping a cup of hot tea. Beside me lay a thick copy of the master dowry list. The head steward sent by the Vance family started reading the inventory in a booming voice.
One scroll of the Heart Sutra by the great Zhao Mingfu of the previous dynasty, 12 bolts of cloud brocade, royal tribute from the Jiangnan Weaving Bureau, a pair of East Sea pearls, each the size of a fist, 300 acres of fertile land in the South District, 8 thriving shops in the East District.
With each item called out, a designated Vance servant, escorted by a sterling attendant, would enter the storeroom and carefully load the items onto the carts. Everything from the storeroom's heaping piles of antiques, calligraphy, and paintings, gold, silver, and jade, to the main courtyard's full set of rosewood furniture that I'd used for over 20 years, and Persian carpets, to the kitchen's full set of blue and white porcelain dinnerware from the previous dynasty's royal kiln, and even the rare green plum blossoms in the back garden, painstakingly transplanted from Jiangnan at great expense, was all part of my dowry. Now the flower pots and soil were all dug up and loaded onto carts. The servants of the general's manor were stunned one after another. They never imagined that this magnificent mansion had more than half of its belongings, owned by the usually gentle and quiet lady. What they thought was the general's manor's wealth was actually just Lady Vance's dowry. Between 9 and 11 in the morning, Alexander and Chloe rushed back home. They watched as the servants, like worker ants, constantly hauled out valuables. Watching the once opulent hall go empty, their faces went from shock to anger, then to helplessness. Alexander rushed up to me, his eyes red, his voice shaking with anger.
Mother, do you have to be this ruthless? You want the entire capital to laugh at the Sterling family?
I lifted my eyes and took a sip of tea. The tea was warm, just right.
I'm just taking back what's mine. Where's the ruthlessness in that?
I set the teacup down and looked at him coldly.
Or, do you want me to take this dowry list to the city magistrate's office and beat the drum to file a complaint? One by one, sue the Sterling family for taking my dowry? Let the city magistrate judge whether these things belong to the Vance family or the Sterling family.
Alexander's face instantly turned beet red. He couldn't get a word out. It was too shameful for him to take. His bright future couldn't withstand such a huge scandal. Chloe was sobbing nearby.
Mom, please stop. Dad will be back any minute. If Dad comes back and sees the manor empty, he'll be heartbroken.
Whether he's sad or not is none of my business.
I cut her off coldly.
From the moment the royal decree was issued, he and I have been strangers. Whether his manor's empty or loaded, it's none of my business. If you really care about him, then ride straight to Northwood now, bring back that comfort of his, and those 6 kids and 1 grandkid of his. Bring them all back to the capital. That is his home. This place is not.
My words cut deep into their hearts. They went pale. They couldn't say a word. The move lasted 3 full days. When the last carriage drove away, I was the last to walk out of the general's manor. I turned back and stared at this prison, where I spent 26 years of my life and effort. The red-painted gate was still imposing, but inside, it was now empty and desolate. I didn't miss it at all. From now on, this is merely Victor's manor, and has nothing to do with me, Eleanor. Everyone in the capital got it. This wasn't the general divorcing his wife. It was his wife, from a top family, who, in the most dignified yet ruthless way, divorced this war hero. It was on the 3rd day after receiving the royal decree that Victor raced back to the capital day and night. He hastily handed over his duties at the northern frontier with only one thought in mind, which was that before everything was beyond fixing, he must return to the capital to see me and make me take back this crazy decision. In his mind, he still arrogantly believed that as long as he came back, and as long as he was willing to bow his head, I would definitely give in. What he thought about was still how to save his ruined reputation, and how to calm the storm. However, when he, travel-worn and exhausted, burst into the general's manor, he was totally stunned. The scene before him made him wonder if he'd stepped into the wrong house. The tall pillars were still there, and the delicate carved windows were still there, but aside from that, everything was bleak and bare. In the main hall, apart from a few plain and worn-out tables and chairs, it was empty, with not even a single scroll on the walls. Wind blew through the corridor, kicking up dust from the floor, and bringing a bitter cold that sent a chill down his spine. This didn't feel like home, but a hollow shell that had just been ransacked.
Where'd everybody go? Where's all the stuff?
He was like an enraged lion, roaring at the few trembling servants left. The old butler, Alfred, scrambled out and knelt before him, with a mournful face.
General, you're finally back. Madam Eleanor, she took her dowry, all of it, she took it all away.
Victor's mind went blank. He rushed to the backyard like a madman. To the master bedroom. To the storeroom. Everywhere he went was empty. The things he had taken for granted, the precious rosewood furniture, the priceless antiques and jade, the calligraphy supplies he used freely, all gone. This home he was so proud of had been stripped of its very foundation and soul, leaving only an empty shell. Finally, he felt panic. He burst out of the manor and mounted his horse, racing toward the Vance villa in the South District like a madman. But what awaited him was a tightly shut gate and a row of stern-faced Vance guards.
Open this door. Tell Eleanor to get out here.
He pounded on the vermilion gate, his voice hoarse with anger and urgency. The steward of the Vance villa, Thomas, came out promptly. Through the gate, he bowed with neither humility nor arrogance.
General Sterling, my lady said, she is unwell and cannot see visitors.
Victor laughed at the sheer absurdity of it.
Am I a guest? I'm her husband.
Butler Thomas's face showed just the right amount of surprise.
You must be joking, General. The royal decree has been issued. You and my lady have severed all ties. To my lady, you are indeed a guest.
Victor was so choked up he could barely breathe. He pointed at Butler Thomas, his fingers trembling.
You, tell Eleanor to come out. What does she mean by hiding from me?
My lady has said everything that needed to be said is written in the divorce papers. She has nothing to say, nor does she wish to.
Butler Thomas bowed again, turned around, and went back into the villa. No matter how loudly Victor shouted outside the gate, there was no answer. He was the illustrious general of the North, commanding vast armies with a fearsome reputation. But in the capital, before this modest villa, he felt utterly powerless for the first time. He couldn't force his way in. This was Eleanor, a woman newly favored by the Queen Mother, his ex-wife, now bearing a royal title. If he dared to act recklessly, the royal censor's memorials would bury him tomorrow. In the end, Victor could only dejectedly, wretchedly return to that cold, empty general's manor. It was late at night. The manor was dark, devoid of any signs of life. He was hungry. There was no hot meal. He was thirsty. There was no fragrant tea to soothe him. He was exhausted. No warm bed to sleep in. It finally hit him that without Eleanor, this house was a total disaster. He started desperately recalling everything I'd done for him, thinking about how I kept the manor spotless, how I packed for every campaign without fail, how I had hot meals ready when he came home, how I handled all his courtly affairs, so he never had to worry about a thing. Those memories back then he took for granted without a second thought. Now though, they were like white-hot pokers, burning him with guilt and unease, filling him with terror. He finally too late realized what he'd lost wasn't merely a wife. What he'd lost was the entire foundation of his stability and honor, the backdrop to his achievements, the support he could waste without a second thought, his strongest pillar. The next morning court became Victor's trial. He had just returned in triumph, with no reward from the king yet, when he was hit with a storm of accusations. The royal censor from the royal inspectorate stepped forward first, court tablet in hand, with righteous fury.
Your Majesty, I impeach General of the North, Victor Sterling. As a husband, he is unfaithful and disloyal. For 26 years, he deceived his wife. He kept a mistress in the northern frontier. He fathered illegitimate sons in scandal. As a high-ranking minister, he has failed to govern his household and lacks moral integrity. How can he command troops? How can he be an example to the realm? I beg your Majesty to punish him severely, to set the record straight.
These words struck like a thunderbolt and exploded in the royal throne room. Although rumors had already spread in the capital, being publicly impeached by the royal censor in court changed everything. The king on his throne remained expressionless, non-committal, but that silence was itself a statement. Then, several political enemies of Victor Sterling in court seized the opportunity to speak out, their words sharp and cutting. They argued that if he couldn't govern his own household, then he might also have disciplinary issues in the army. They seemed determined to strip him of everything. Victor Sterling stood among the ministers, feeling like needles pricking his back. He wanted to defend himself, but found he had no way to defend himself. With the facts right there, how could he deny them? The morning court ended in a tense atmosphere. The king ultimately did not convict him, but he didn't show him any kindness either. Then came the list of rewards for the triumphant heroes. As the commander, his name was completely erased. This was the king's silent warning. Victor Sterling, dazed and dejected, returned to the general's manor. For the first time, he truly understood what it meant to be utterly alone. He pinned all his hopes on his children. He ordered Alexander to go to the Vance villa immediately and beg me to step in, even if it meant submitting a petition to the palace to beg the Queen Mother for mercy, and to say it was all a misunderstanding. However, Alexander looked troubled.
Father, I can't go.
Why can't you go?
Victor roared.
My colleagues are all gossiping behind my back. They say I'm unfilial, that I helped you deceive my own biological mother. At the office today, I could barely hold my head up.
Victor then looked at his daughter, Chloe. Chloe cried even harder.
Father, when I returned to my husband's home, my mother-in-law, in front of all the servants, made snide remarks. She said the Sterling family has no moral integrity. She said I don't know my place, that I side with outsiders to bully my own biological mother. My husband also advised me not to go out for a while.
Only then did Victor realize the situation was more serious than he imagined. Eleanor Vance, had built 26 years of connections and reputation in the capital. The influence of the Vance family far exceeded his imagination. Public opinion across the capital overwhelmingly sided with me, the victim. He became a disloyal, unrighteous, morally corrupt scoundrel. His children, because they chose the wrong side in this matter, were labeled unfilial. they were ostracized in their respective social circles. Victor Sterling wouldn't accept it. He started sending me gifts like crazy. Precious jewelry, rare furs, exotic antiques. He kept sending crate after crate to the Vance villa, but in the end, everything was returned unopened. It didn't even get past the gate. Just as he was at his wit's end, Lily, his mistress at the northern frontier, also sent a letter. The letter was no longer sweet and gentle. Instead, it was nothing but urgent demands and pleas. She heard that I had emptied the general's manor. She was scared she'd be left with nothing. She urged Victor to quickly figure out a way to bring her and their 7 kids to the capital to live in comfort. Give her and the kids a proper place in society. Internal turmoil and external threats, at his wit's end, besieged on all sides. These words, he only saw in war manuals, now described his own life perfectly. In the empty manor, Victor Sterling felt real despair for the first time. He began desperately wanting to see me. He urgently needed me by his side again, wanted me to play the part again of the devoted wife who puts the greater good first, to save him from this mess. But he forgot that devoted wife had been killed by his own hands. While I was the talk of the capital, I wasn't idle. I took some of the jewelry that was easy to liquidate and had the Vance trading firm sell them off, freeing up a ton of cash fast. Then, I used that money on the busiest street in the capital, Crimson Avenue, to rent a 3-story shopfront. I named it Phoenix Pavilion. The Phoenix is calling, on that high hill. I, Eleanor Vance, will be that Phoenix reborn from fire. With my exquisite embroidery skills, famous in the capital since I was a girl, and my sharp eye for the tastes and trends of high society ladies, I personally designed several one-of-a-kind embroidery pieces. There was a stunning double-sided folding screen with different colors on each side, a shawl embroidered with tiny pearls and hidden patterns, and scented sachets inspired by Western regions. On opening day of the Phoenix Pavilion, I didn't make a big fuss, but a black plaque with gold letters, inscribed by the Queen Mother herself, was hung high above the door. Now that's a grand opening. On opening day, almost every prominent duchess and lady in the capital showed up in person to support me. Maybe they came out of respect for the Queen Mother, or for the Vance family's sake, or maybe out of pure curiosity about me, the talk of the town. But when they saw the exquisite and cleverly designed embroidery pieces in the Phoenix Pavilion, all their looks of mere curiosity turned into genuine admiration and awe. The Phoenix Pavilion became an instant hit. The items here were priced exorbitantly. They were beyond the reach of ordinary people, but it quickly became the capital's new fashion standard. Owning an embroidery piece from the Phoenix Pavilion became the most boast-worthy thing among the noble ladies. I was no longer known as the pitiful Mrs. Sterling. When people saw me, they'd respectfully call me Madame Eleanor. My name no longer existed just as someone's wife or someone's mother. The name Eleanor Vance alone stands for taste, skill, and unshakable power. I started truly living for myself. Every day, I kept busy with the Phoenix Pavilion. In my spare time, I read in my villa, sipped tea, and met friends. At a literary gathering hosted by the Grand Princess, I met the Minister of Protocol's youngest son, Julian Thorne. He was gentle and refined, known for his poetry and painting. He never, because of my age or experience, showed the slightest contempt or pity. Quite the opposite, his gaze was clear, and his words were full of sincere appreciation and respect. He'd discuss brushwork of old paintings with me. He'd praise my business sense running the Phoenix Pavilion. He would write me a little poem, admiring the Phoenix Pavilion's exquisite embroidery. I never thought of remarrying. Victor Sterling's 26-year lie had long killed any hope of romance in me, but being treated as an equal, genuinely respected, was something I'd never experienced in that suffocating marriage. I started attending all sorts of literary gatherings and tea parties. I found that once I stopped confining myself to the inner chambers, the outside world was so vast and amazing. On my face, a genuine smile started to appear, replacing that proper, composed yet lifeless mask. My life became incredibly full every day, incredibly vibrant. I came alive again. The more I thrived, the more Victor Sterling suffered. He heard from others about the bustling Phoenix Pavilion, the Queen Mother's support for me, and how the high society ladies fawned over me, and even about the young and handsome Julian, the minister's son, and the rumors of our close association. Jealousy, resentment, anger, and humiliation. All these emotions gnawed at his heart like venomous snakes. In his eyes, everything I did was a deliberate attempt to embarrass him. The better I lived, the more it highlighted his failure and disgrace. I became the capital's inspirational model, while he became the abandoned laughingstock with moral failings. He couldn't accept this truth. Cornered, Victor finally made a foolish decision that doomed him. He went all in, sending a rider post-haste to sneak Lily, his mistress in Northwood, along with his 6 children and 1 grandchild, back to the capital. He settled them at a country estate outside town. He naively thought that once they were here and it became a fait accompli, over time, people would come to accept it. He even fantasized that he could use these children to control me and force me to compromise. But in the capital, walls have ears. A great general brought a large family of women and children of unknown origins to the capital's outskirts. Such a commotion could never stay hidden. Word got out quickly. This time, even the king, who who still had a soft spot for him, was utterly furious. The divorce decree had only just been issued, the ink was barely dry, and Victor Sterling had already brought his mistress and illegitimate children into the capital. What was he doing? This was an open challenge to royal authority. It was a slap in the face to the Queen Mother and the King himself. A harshly worded royal decree was delivered directly to the general's manor. The King blasted him for his scandalous behavior and lack of remorse. He was ordered to forfeit a year's salary and confined to his home, forbidden to leave without a royal decree. This essentially cut off all his political prospects, and the mistress he once thought of as a gentle comfort, Lily, was no pushover either. In the capital, a dazzling city, after seeing the glitz, her ambitions grew wild. Watching Victor fall from grace, she began constantly demanding status and demanding money. She raised hell at the country estate, shredding what little dignity Victor had left. His illegitimate sons, raised wild on the northern frontier, caused even more trouble in the capital. Within days, they got into a brawl and were arrested, hauled to the magistrate's office. Victor had to grovel for help, blowing his last savings just to get them out. He was tortured by these very children he once prided himself on, worn down to nothing, a total disgrace. The bombs he himself planted finally, one by one, exploded around him. Every smug step he took to fix things only sped up his own destruction. The once mighty general of the North had turned into a beast, trapped by family scandals and petty troubles. Victor, with no other choice, finally defied the king's decree and rushed out of the manor at dusk. Like a cornered beast, he charged straight into the Phoenix Pavilion. Just then, I was upstairs having tea with a few ladies discussing the next season's new designs. A commotion came from downstairs. My maid rushed up frantically.
Madam Eleanor, something terrible has happened. General Sterling has barged in.
My hand holding the teacup remained steady, without a tremor.
Let him come up.
I ordered calmly.
Perfect. It's time we put an end to this.
When Victor stormed up the stairs, the ladies had wisely excused themselves. He stood before me. It had only been a month since we last met, yet he looked 10 years older. His hair was disheveled, his eyes sunken and bloodshot. His once straight back was now hunched. When he spoke, it was a question barely containing his fury.
Eleanor, do you hate me that much? Do you have to watch me lose everything, my reputation, my family, and my life, before you're satisfied?
I looked at him calmly, and even reached out to pour him a cup of tea.
General Sterling, you're wrong. I just took back what's mine. And I'm living my own life. As for your downfall, that was the path you chose. What does that have to do with me? If you hadn't brought those people to the capital and humiliated yourself, why would the king be angry? Your reputation was destroyed by your own hands.
My calmness seemed to anger him even more. He swept away the teacup I offered. Scalding tea splashed onto my hand. A burning pain shot through me, but I didn't even blink. He began to show weakness. His voice was pleading.
Eleanor, I know I was wrong. I was really wrong. After 20+ years together, for Alexander and Chloe's sake, can you just forgive me this once?
Affection.
I finally had to interrupt him. I felt that these two words,
coming from his mouth, it's an insult. My affection, in that courtyard in Northwood, the moment I saw you with a house full of children and grandchildren, was already thrown to the dogs. As for my children,
I sneered coldly.
When they chose to help you deceive me, they should have expected this outcome. They're your children, Victor. They stopped being my pride long ago.
My words left him speechless, his face turning pale and red. He finally broke down. With a thud, he dropped to his knees before me. A general who once stood tall and proud was now, like a pathetic stray, humbly begging.
Eleanor, please come back. I'll send them away. I'll send them all away. Far, far away. You'll never have to see them again. Let's start over. Okay? The general's manor can't do without you. I can't do without you either.
I quietly watched him kneel on the ground, making a total fool of himself. I smiled. I pointed behind him at Alexander and Chloe, who'd rushed over upon hearing the news.
General Sterling, have you forgotten? Your new family are still at the country estate outside the city, waiting for you to appease them. Waiting for you to legitimize them.
I stood up and walked up to him. I looked down at him. I leaned in close, and in a voice only we could hear, word by word, I drove the sharpest blade into his last line of defense.
You disgust me, filthy through and through.
Those words struck like a thunderbolt, hitting Victor and his two children. Their faces went deathly pale in a flash. I didn't spare them another glance. I turned around and walked gracefully up the stairs to the top floor, leaving the despairing, broken figures of that family of three completely behind me. After that confrontation, Victor was completely shattered. His spirit, as if struck by my words, was completely drained. Not long after, Lily, his mistress from the country estate, seeing that his situation was hopeless, grabbed his few remaining valuables, took her eldest son, and fled without a trace, leaving behind only a few young children crying for food. In the end, the king, remembering his past military service, didn't demote him to a commoner, but he was stripped of all his actual official positions and left as a general in name only. He spent his days in that empty manor, relying on a meager official salary to raise the kids whose names he couldn't even remember. He began to drown his sorrows in alcohol every day, and soon became a disheveled, booze-reeking drunk, making him the biggest laughingstock in the capital. Alexander and Chloe came many times to the Phoenix Pavilion and the Vance Villa begging to see me, but I turned them away every time. Alexander, due to his unfilial behavior and his father's scandal, struggled in his official career, was sidelined by his colleagues, and had no hope of promotion. Chloe also got nothing but cold shoulders from her husband's family. The couple was at odds. Life was unbearably bitter. Their lives, because they had picked the wrong side, were cast with a shadow that could never be erased. They regretted it deeply, but could never earn my forgiveness. Some mistakes last a lifetime. On my 49th birthday, I held a banquet on the top floor of Phoenix Pavilion. This time, there was no long-distance traveling, no self-indulgent surprises. Only warm candlelight, sincere blessings, and laughter filling the hall. The Queen Mother gave generous gifts. High society friends from the capital gathered. The Grand Princess, several duchesses, all came to celebrate with me. Julian Thorne came too. He brought a scroll he painted himself. On it were 4 bold characters: the sky is vast, the sea is wide, and I stood by the window, raising my glass. To the guests in the hall, and to myself, I whispered,
To yesterday's death, to today's life. Glasses clinked, laughter and chatter abounded.
Casually, from the upstairs window, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure on the street corner. That disheveled drunkard was staring blankly up at the lights of Phoenix Pavilion, his eyes full of regret and confusion. Then he stumbled, staggered, and disappeared into the deep night. I saw it, but only smiled faintly, averted my gaze, and turned to chat and laugh with friends beside me. That person, that past, to me, was like a dream from last night, leaving no trace upon waking. The warm, bright candlelight through the window fell on my face, and lit up the light in my eyes. My life, from the year I turned 48, truly began.